Hey everyone, today we are looking into Juana of Castile, the queen who in 1516 united two kingdoms into the modern-day nation of Spain. Nevertheless, her life was blighted by psychological problems, leading to her being called Juana la Loca. But was she actually mad, or the victim of her family's plotting? Juana, whose name is anglicised in the English-speaking world as Joan or Joanna, was born on the 6th of November 1479. She was the third child and second daughter of Queen Isabella I of Castile and King Ferdinand II of Aragon, with an elder sister Isabella and a slightly older brother John. But both would die within a year of each other in 1497 and 1498. Consequently, making Juana the heir presumptive to her parents' dominions. Additionally, Juana had a number of younger sisters, most notably Catherine, who would go on to marry the King of England, Henry VIII. In fact, it was Henry's efforts to divorce Catherine in the 1520s and 1530s, which would famously lead to England's split with the Roman Catholic Church. Juana was born into a family which ruled over most of the Iberian Peninsula, but in a way which is unfamiliar to modern eyes. In the 8th century, most of Iberia had been conquered by the Muslim armies of Arabs and Berbers from North Africa. Only a small portion of the country in the extreme north remained in Christian hands, and here the Kingdom of Asturias had emerged by the end of the 8th century. As the Spanish reconquista of the peninsula occurred gradually between the 8th and 15th centuries, a large number of small kingdoms emerged in different regions. These included the Kingdom of Galicia in the northwest, the Kingdom of Portugal in the west, the Kingdom of Leon in the north, the Principality of Catalonia in the east, and the Kingdom of Valencia to the south of that. But by the 15th century, most of these had been absorbed and annexed into the two most powerful kingdoms. The first of these was Castile, which was located in the centre of the country around Madrid, and also held the region south towards Toledo and north along the coast of the Bay of Biscay. The other was Aragon, the traditional capital of which was Zaragoza, but which had expanded east and southeast to also absorb Barcelona and Valencia. Juana's parents' marriage in 1469 created a marital and dynastic union between the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon. Moreover, with the completion of the conquest of Granada, the last of the Muslim taifas, or principalities, in 1492, the two monarchs came to rule collectively over all of the Iberian Peninsula, other than the independent Kingdom of Portugal in the west. During their lives, Isabella and Ferdinand continued to rule Castile and Aragon separately, as individual kingdoms. But whichever of their children succeeded them would one day succeed to this vast territory. At the time of her birth, though, it did not seem like this would be Juana. Juana's upbringing was typical of her royal birth. She received a Renaissance education which mixed the teachings of the Church Fathers such as Saint Jerome and Saint Augustine with the works of Greek and Roman authors such as Seneca, Cicero, and Quintilian. The young princess also learned to play several musical instruments, including the clavichord, guitar, and the monochord. Finally, she learned several languages. Various dialects were spoken throughout her parents' kingdoms, and so Juana had to learn Castilian, Leonese, Catalan, and Portuguese. She also clashed with her mother in her youth. Isabella and Ferdinand's religious zeal was legendary throughout Europe, so much so that they were referred to as the most Catholic monarchs. Isabella had even established the famous Spanish Inquisition to prosecute heretics. Juana is reported to have been a lukewarm Catholic though, and there were rumours at the time that her mother had her effectively tortured in an effort to increase her piety. Thus, it was the beginning of some family disunity, which might well have been the source of Juana's later plight. Because she had two older siblings, it was not believed that Juana would succeed to her parents' dominions. Accordingly, a decision was taken early on to marry her into one of Europe's other great families, a union which would strengthen Castile and Aragon's foreign policy. In the late 15th century, Isabella and Ferdinand's foremost enemy was France, a nation which they were at war with for control of the Italian peninsula from the early 1940s onwards. France had another bitter enemy at the time, in the shape of the Austrian House of Habsburg, which ruled the Low Countries, a broad region encapsulating most of the modern-day Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and parts of northeastern France. Accordingly, the head of the House of Habsburg, Maximilian I, who was also the Holy Roman Emperor, agreed to marry his eldest son and heir, Philip the Fair, to Juana. He would also marry his daughter, Margaret, to Isabella and Ferdinand's eldest son, John, thus cementing a very strong marital alliance between the Spanish monarchs and the House of Habsburg. Juana was married to Philip in 1496, when she was still just 16 years of age. The marriage entourage that headed to the Low Countries consisted of over 100 ships and arrived there in August, around 2 months before they were married on the 19th of October. The couple would go on to have 6 children, who were born in quick succession between 1498 and 1507, 4 daughters and 2 sons, each of whom would go on to rule as emperors, kings and queens. Yet, despite the outward dynastic success of Philip and Juana's marriage, there were problems underneath the surface. Philip was a serial philanderer, and his unfaithfulness to his wife was common knowledge. More worryingly, Juana was already beginning to show some signs of mental instability. During their years living at sites such as Brussels in the Low Countries, she would frequently oscillate between periods of depression and rage, but it is unclear if she was suffering from a species of genuine illness, or if it was just her emotional state owing to an unhappy marriage. Rumours about Juana's poor mental state were all the more concerning as she quickly became the eldest surviving of her parents' children, with the deaths of John and Isabella in 1497 and 1498. John died of an unspecified illness in 1497. His wife Margaret had been pregnant at the time of his death, but the child was stillborn, and John's line consequently ended with his death. Then, Isabella died the following year while in labour, and although the infant survived, he was sickly from the beginning and passed as well in 1500. Therefore, Juana now became a far more significant figure within the dynastic politics of early 16th century Europe, and her husband was well aware that he was now married to the successor to the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon. In light of this, he increased his efforts to stifle and control her in the years that followed, which only added to their marital woes. Moreover, Juana appears to have engaged in a form of passive protest in response to his overbearing behaviour, often remaining in her rooms and refusing to eat. Again, it is unclear if she had a genuine mental illness at this time, or was simply acting out in a situation which she could not control. These dynastic manoeuvrings took another important turn in November 1504, when Juana's mother Isabella died. Because the terms of Isabella and Ferdinand's marriage contract years earlier had included a stipulation that Castile and Aragon would continue to be ruled separately during their lifetimes, Juana now succeeded as Queen of Castile, even while her father continued to rule the Kingdom of Aragon. Things were complicated by the rivalry between Ferdinand, Juana's father, and her husband Philip the Fair, both of whom now sought to control Castile, while Juana was queen thereof. Accordingly, Ferdinand began pressing the idea that Juana was mentally unstable. As a result, he argued that he should rule Castile as regent of the kingdom until such a time as Juana's eldest son Charles was of an age to succeed. This would effectively bypass Juana, who was now being treated as mentally incapacitated, and in the process, Philip Fair's efforts to interfere in Castile would be blocked. With this strategy in place, Ferdinand undertook a campaign from 1505 onwards to convince the nobles of Castile that he should be elected to rule as regent of the kingdom in his daughter's stead, she being of unsound mind. For her part, Juana did nothing to help her case in the months that followed. Then, in September 1506, her husband died suddenly of typhoid fever. Now, according to several accounts by contemporaries, Juana refused to leave the body of her husband, despite their lack of affection for each other during his lifetime. The Queen apparently kept the coffin in close proximity to her and would frequently have it opened to gaze on the decaying corpse of her husband. At least, this was the story which was widely circulated. The coffin story and others concerning Juana's alleged madness were soon put to good use. In the summer of 1507, Juana was forced to hand over the regency of the Kingdom of Castile to her father. She was now effectively being relegated to a position of zero power, based on the argument that she was mentally unsound, while her father took over Castile. Thus, the alleged madness of Queen Juana had led to Ferdinand seizing power in Castile and adding it to his Kingdom of Aragon. It has accordingly been suggested by many historians ever since that Ferdinand and his followers effectively invented the tale of Juana's madness in order to seize power in Castile, or that her genuine eccentricities were exaggerated to this end. Juana was originally detained at the Palace of Tordesillas in the province of Valladolid, the same place which the famous treaty dividing up the Americas between the Spanish monarchs and the Kingdom of Portugal had been named after in 1494. Here, Juana lived with her daughter Catherine. She remained here for years, effectively under arrest by her father's regime, and he would only go on to visit her twice during this period. Eventually, Ferdinand died in 1516. There was now a peculiar occurrence. Juana, the supposedly mad queen who had been under house arrest for several years, now finally succeeded to the Kingdom of Aragon. As a result, the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon were finally united under her rule. The new territory she ruled over would be known after the Romans' name for the region, Hispania. It was called the Kingdom of Spain, and Juana was its first queen. But despite this alleged power, Juana remained a prisoner, except now her jailer was her son Charles, rather than her father. In order to ensure his own succession to the United Kingdom of Spain, Charles continued to keep his mother confined as an alleged madwoman. There was one fleeting effort, though, to restore Juana to her rightful place. A revolt gripped Spain in 1520, led by a group of nobles who were concerned about Habsburg influence in the country, a fact exacerbated by Charles basing himself out of the Low Countries and rarely visiting his Spanish dominions. These nobles freed Juana, but when the revolt was suppressed, so with it yet again went the Queen's liberty. It would be the last time Juana was used for political purposes. She spent the next 35 years under house arrest at Tordesillas. Little is known about her life there, down to her death in 1555 when she was in her mid-70s. Meanwhile, Charles went on to become the most powerful ruler Europe had seen since the fall of the Roman Empire, and before Napoleon Bonaparte conquered much of the continent in the early 19th century. In addition to his Spanish territories, acquired by displacing his mother, Charles succeeded to his father's Habsburg territories in the Low Countries and the Habsburg lands in Austria and Hungary, as well as occupying a paramount position in Germany as the Holy Roman Emperor. Sadly, there is no way of knowing if Juana was actually mad or not. Some scholars have speculated that she might have suffered from some type of schizophrenia, while others have suggested she was bipolar and exhibited signs of manic depression. However, it is also true to say that her alleged madness benefited both her father and her son substantially from a political perspective, and it is entirely possible that Juana, the Mad Queen, was actually perfectly sane and the victim of a brutal family power grab. Thank you so much everyone for watching this video on Juana of Castile. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave me a like and a comment down below, and if you're new, why not subscribe? If you have any suggestions, be sure to leave them in the comments, or there are links to my email and Instagram in the description. I hope you guys have notifications turned on so you get all my videos as soon as I upload them. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.